I don't even know where to begin, to be honest, yo, because I've been releasing, you know, podcasts, been doing music, been just doing a lot of content for over 20 years, like all together when I mashed certain things in. I remember when I first started recording myself in a podcast format, this is when SoundCloud was still a thing. And, even when people was making fun of like SoundCloud artists and rappers and stuff, it's like, you'll be surprised. It's like same thing with YouTube or MySpace. Like, there are a lot of people who've gotten discovered and have been able to have thriving careers off of, MySpace and YouTube and SoundCloud. And, Justin Bieber is an example. Soulja Boy is an example. So you have these guys who have been, they was able to find some, internet success, and we still live in the digital era. And, now with AI music, and the algorithm, and a lot of things are, even a lot of content is AI. A lot of things are being questioned now. But here's the thing too that I wanted to say, and I'm always going to stand 10 toes down on it. Like, we talk about the internet all the time. I mean, the internet's been around since, like, I was in elementary school when the internet first came out. But, with social media is just one big public group chat. Because just because there are people, I say this all the time, just because there's people who lie, who make up stories, who say this and say that might be false, it doesn't take away from the people who are actually up there, trying to create, share their gifts. Because again, we have to invest in ourselves. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices. Sometimes we have to spend a little money. Sometimes we might have to, do certain things that we might not want to do. But even like the thing with AI is also, it's like, some people just can't afford to invest in themselves, in a sense of where, like, you spending $300, $500 on, studio time because you're spending 8 hours or 10 hours in a studio each session or day or whatever. However much you spend on yourself. We still have real bills. People still have our responsibilities. Like, because the thing with me is, like I said, I've had my fair share of, putting out podcasts, putting out music, putting out any form of art. So the thing that I wanted to share is, like, we have to allow people to create the way that they want to create. I know people feel like, AI is, isn't as authentic as, actually going to the studio and recording or writing all this. But I'm gonna tell y'all in on the little secret, and I might have said this on a previous episode before, but AI is just another tool. There are a lot of dope singers and songwriters who use AI for music. There's a lot of dope writers and creators who use AI to, do film, because again, the way that the economy is, and sometimes the way that things are set up, some people aren't in the position, or doesn't have the connections, or doesn't even have the resources to, pay for a videographer, or pay for a singer, or go to the studios, or find somebody who will be able to help them do these things. They say, teamwork make the dream work, and I stand on that as well. But sometimes you just have to do it yourself. Some people might have the creative mind, but they might not have the skill. And someone like myself, there are certain things that I know how to do effortlessly, but I haven't learned the skill. Like, I haven't went to school for it. I can look at all the YouTube videos on how to fix a car. I can look up all the YouTube videos on, how to, perform surgery, but I don't have the credentials to do that. Because, like I've said, I've done things, like, the only difference between me and a doctor is the practice. Like, I've read up on certain certain things that doctors do, but it's like I'm not in the clinics, I'm not in the hospitals, I'm not performing different surgeries or different medical criteria, because even with that there's a protocol. One of my closest, dearest friends is a doctor, and we had these conversations about it before. So again, people, y'all have to let people do what is right for them. People are going to criticize art anyway. That's really what it is. Art imitates life. So whether you're authentically creating things, putting in the hard work, the labor and all that stuff, that's marvelous. That's great. But if you're somebody who can, who might have the creative mind to, prompt the systems to make things work that way, great too. Because I'm gonna tell you this: if you're not creative, you might not be creative enough to even, bring it to life. It's just kind of like with podcasts. People feel like it's more than just talking. But, one thing that I had learned, because again, I've been doing podcasts for many years, for more than a decade at this point. Podcast is just a broadcast. It's not necessarily like being on radio, but it is being on radio. And I'm gonna say this: all you gotta do is talk. I mean, again, I don't really believe that you have to have video. I know that's the way that the world, like how the podcast culture is now, because everybody's trying to, they gotta have good sound quality, they gotta have video quality. You gotta kind of be presentable for people to want to listen to you and want to watch you. But again, it's called a podcast. If you have a video, I think sometimes that kind of takes away from the podcast. It's just the same thing when people say if you're going to do AI, or if you're like, even like with hip hop, like, don't call it hip hop if you're using certain things. So it's like, okay, if you make AI music, you can make AI music. Same thing with podcasts. If you are going to present your podcast with audio and video, then you can call it something else. But see, I'm not somebody that does that. Like, I don't nitpick. I don't sit here and try to change the goalpost on that. I do feel like changing the goalpost is necessary, because when you reach the goal, you want to, move it so you can reach another goal. That's kind of how I look at things. Like, my mind might be a little broad, and that's probably why I'm not really maybe not as fluent in certain things according to people. But again, we are in a space now where entrepreneurs are striving, and there are some that's also struggling. There's always going to be struggle. There's always going to be strife. So I think we just have to give people the grace, because there's going to be some people who are dope enough to be able to get the listening and the following up to like 1 million and just within a week. And then there's some people who might get that same following in a matter of years. Certain people have the credentials and the name to cut the line. And the reason why I say cut the line is because, again, there's a lot of podcasters out there who might have had a rock career, might have had a athletic career, and their fans followed them over to the podcast space. However, if you're somebody who might not be as popular or might not be as known, you're starting from scratch. Don't nobody know you. You got to get a following. You got to have some people, like, you got to have some relatability. You got to have some likability. And, but again, things take time. it just all goes back again to why do you do it? I mean, everybody needs to, make money and to try to, make a living for themselves and do what they got to do to provide for themselves and their family. And I think this is another thing where, like me, for an example, I'm a big example and I'm a big advocate for, do it yourself, because again, I'm not famous. I'm not, financially wealthy, but I have a dream. I have a passion. And sometimes because I'm still, I still work 9 to 5. It might not take me, quickly to release things. Like I've been for the past year, from starting like last year, I have put out more music than I ever put out. And although I have used AI, they're still my words. And I know people can feel like, I don't have a ghostwriter. And I'm aware of, there has been some AI content that was using other people's voices and, production without the consent. And I definitely feel for that. And I'm sorry for that. And I hope I'm not, benefiting from that. But what I will say is, when it comes to music is more than just, okay. Yeah, music is more than just how it sounds. I mean, it is lyrics. I listen to the words. I mean, there are some songs that don't make no sense that I enjoy because of how it sounds. But music is more than just, the sound. There's cadence, there's flow, there's delivery. You might have to have the vocals for it. You gotta have, there's certain melodies. So there's certain things I will agree and I will say, like, look, I understand it, I get it, but as a creative at heart, this is just something that I enjoy to do. So even now, like with my podcast, like I don't like nobody, like I don't have no help when I do this. Like there's nobody producing it for me. Sometimes it's go off the fly. I always open the doors for people to put, suggestions, requests, questions up there, just so I can kind of have a better line of production. But sometimes I'm just winging it. Even when I was, doing like executive producing my podcast, where I actually had the lineup as far as like what I wanted to talk about, I was still winging it, because I do feel like, again, when you're doing a podcast, you are platforming your voice and expressing yourself through your perspective. Now, there's different type of podcasts. There are health podcasts, self-help podcasts, there's music podcasts, there's sports podcasts, there's comedy podcasts, there's all type of podcasts. And I have dibbled and dabbled in maybe a couple of those things. I talk about a little bit of random things. That's why even like with the category, it is, society and culture, because I went from talking about pop culture to music. I've had some people on there, some of my associates and friends on there, and we discuss things. I did like certain reviews. I talked about God and the faith. I talked about a lot of different things. I've been proactive in the podcast space, and even when I was just strictly on SoundCloud, when I first started, I was talking to a former coworker of mine. Like I said, this is in like maybe 2015, 2014, and we was recording. I mean, it wasn't long, but it was a good amount of time. It was a nice conversation. I still remember those conversations. And then, like I said, there's certain things. I still have a SoundCloud account, but I haven't really been on SoundCloud in a minute. Like, I still have it. I still have the app on my phone. I haven't signed on in a while. I get notifications sometimes or emails sometimes, like for like updates on certain things, but it's like I had moved up from being exclusively on SoundCloud. So even when I was on Anchor, and then I went to RSS, and then I went to Acast and Podbean. Now I'm back on Spotify for Creator. So it's like there's different avenues. For a long time, I was paying, $30, $40 a month just for the basic. And and I get that we have to spend money to make money, and we have to sometimes spend money to get like the top tier criterias and features. And I'm gonna be honest, I've never really been a fan of that. And like I said, there are certain things that I don't mind doing, but then it's like if I have to do it myself, then it's like I'll do it myself. Like there's certain things it's like, say, I can dish it up, I can't take it. But when it comes to creating, I feel like you can use whatever you have to use at your disposal just to get the message out, just to get what you're creating out. So like I said, I have my YouTube page that I've been constantly putting videos up. I use Suno. I've been on, like I said, I've used Apple. Like there's certain things I pay for certain things as well. But that's like, there's still other things that I gotta take care of. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's bills, whether it's rent, mortgage, car payments, insurance, groceries. I got a child, so we gotta take. So there's not enough money for the things that a lot of people do without having to pick up, other streams of income. But you still have to make time for that. And as somebody who is in their very late 30s, who have experienced fatigue, who has experienced high blood pressure, who have experienced things, and y'all can say it's an excuse or not, but it is what it is. But we have to not take our lives for granted, and we also have to take advantage of the time that we have and capitalize on the time that we do have. But like I said, your health is the most important thing, and I advocate for that very much. I try to keep my health in check. Technically I'm considered obese. I weigh 240 or whatever, and it's certain things that I need to do better at, because I told y'all this before too. Like in my 20s, I was trying to get it. Like I was trying to get to it. Like I'd been to college a couple times, actually left, couldn't stick to it. I've been in relationships, couldn't, those things didn't work out. Still have these desires, but there's a path and a purpose that we all have that God needs us to be on. It's nothing's wrong with wanting to be sufficient, be successful. Nothing's wrong with that. Nothing's wrong with wanting to, be able to, enjoy life, enjoy the fruits of your labor. And I'm gonna say this, and this is another thing I say all the time. When you get closer to God, sometimes your perspective changes. As close to God as I am, I'm still not as close as I need to be. Because I haven't learned or mastered how to take one thing at a time, because everything that's going on in life it's happening simultaneously. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I can get some sleep, but at the same time, I have to take care of my son. I have to go to work. I have to help my mom. I have to do these things. There's certain things that I'm doing that it's like I'm not going to be able to achieve them if I'm asleep. You know, I got to get healthy. I got to get better. But it's like everything is like, make the time. Make the time for the things that you want to do, even when you're doing the things you don't want to do. I have an entrepreneur spirit. I have yet to start my own business. I'm doing things by myself when it comes to, you know, the music and, the music, the podcast mainly, because like I said, I don't really have a studio. I do stuff on my phone, which I'm on now. I use it on my laptop, like I said, because these are skills that I've had to learn myself. Like I said, I graduated from YouTube University, you know what I'm saying? There's certain credentials that I have, even being on certain educational apps. I was able to achieve certain criterias, but again, it's the passion. You know, I believe that your passion might not necessarily be your purpose, but your purpose can be a passion. Like, I have a passion for creating and writing, and I haven't really written stuff as much, you know, as I would like. You know, I do things kind of on the fly. If I get an idea, I might write it down and come back to it later, but I have been able to have a very flourishing mindset, you know, despite the amount of music I have, despite the amount of episodes of podcasts I've had, and the limited amount of viewers, subscribers, listeners, support. I still do it because I have a passion. I have a passion for creating, you know, and this leads to AB1 Studios, another Black exclusive, Anthony Blair's, you know, baby, you know, another blurred line. It can mean anything, you know, and as far as that, you know, there's different meanings to it. But AB1 Studios, that has been a vision for me for many years. Still trying to learn how to build. I know what I want it to be. I might have shared this, but again, you know, I want to be careful as far as to is also sharing, you know, my dreams, because it's not that I'm afraid of somebody stealing it. I do believe in manifestation, but there are certain things we just have to keep to ourselves. But again, AB1 Studios, that is my baby. Everything that I do is under that umbrella. Now it's not legalized right now. Like, so I'm not really making a profit from it, but it's a vision. It's the vision, the visionary of what AB1 Studios is. And for people who knows what studios are, studios can be anything. Like, you know, it can be a studio apartment, it can be a music studio, it can be a dance studio, it can be an, you know, art studio, and you know, that's what it is. And that's where I'm going to leave it at. But like I said, it takes a lot more. You know, it takes a lot more than talking about it. You know, we got to write it down and make it plain. So I say all this to say this, blessed ones, is if you have a dream, if you believe it, you can achieve it. Dream work does make the team work, but if you got to do it yourself for however long you need to do it yourself. Just do it yourself. Sometimes it takes a little bit more time for certain things to grow. If you go outside today and you see a big tree, I don't know, like the person who might have planted that tree or the person who put the tree there, they might be long gone. But some of the trees that we see today are hundreds of years old. You know what I'm saying? Some of these trees that we see today has been around since slavery. Some of these trees that we see today has been around since the colonizers came. Some of these trees we see today has been here since the beginning of time. And then you even see, project redevelopment. There's buildings that's been here for years. There's streets that has been here for years, and there's even new streets and new buildings and new properties and stuff going. Like, there's a lot of things that takes time to blossom, and sometimes it might even take longer to bloom. And that's the difference. There's a season for everything. Notice how in the summertime, grass grows way faster. And then in the wintertime, you might not ever have to cut your grass. There's a time for that. Like, everything has a season. Friends have a season. Relationships have a season. I'm in I didn't just got through my first year at this job that I'm at now. I like it. And then I'm thinking about, even pursuing, a more advanced position. But I do want to say this too, and then I'll be done. Is like, do things that you have to do, but always make time for things that you would like to do. Some people might have a job that they hate because they got to provide. Like I said, they got to take care of themselves. And nothing's wrong with that. But, don't get to the point where you start feeling sorry for yourself or so depressed. You got to make time for things that you love to do. And again, they say, money is just as important as wisdom. You can do a lot with money. You can reach a lot of accomplishments with money. But, wisdom is better, because you can have all the money in the world and you can still be a piece of crap of a person. Sometimes people treat people badly because they got the money too, and you can't, a lot of people, and that's, again, we live in a country, maybe more so than in the world, but in this country, this is a capitalist society. It's all about money and funding. People are complaining about taxes, about inflation, but if you're a business owner, you still got to set your prices. So it's almost kind of like, I'm about to get a business and I'm going to charge this amount because I still have to pay for the things to, support my lifestyle. And ain't nothing wrong with that. However, we have to also take into account that there's some people that might not be able to afford it. Some people might not be in a position. And honestly, that's really not our problem. But at the same time, we have to have compassion for people. And we also have to think about ourselves. But blessed ones, y'all already know the drill. Questions, suggestions, requests, please share it in the comments. Please share it in my emails provided on the podcast profile. And as always, be safe, stay prosperous, productive, and most of all, positive. This is Blair, your Care Bear, no hair, don't care. I'm out.